The Our Father prayer never really tells us to ask God for our daily bread. That is a blatant mistranslation.
No, it's not. Listen, nothing against Jesus or whatnot. I consider him a friend. Do we have our disagreements? Yes. I mean, I disagree on to what extent Catholics and Protestants can pray together and whether or not you can kiss your boyfriend or girlfriend. We agree on many things. So this is nothing against Jesus and whatnot. But is the Our Father prayer a mistranslation? No, it's not.
In Matthew 6:11, we see that Christ tells us how to pray. Give us this day our daily bread. However, the Greek word used is epiousion, which doesn't mean daily. The word epiousion was completely made up by the apostles, and it's only ever used in these two Bible verses, talking about the Lord's Prayer, giving us this day our daily bread. The word epiousios is a combination of two Greek words, epi and ousios. Epi meaning top or above, think epidermic, and then ousios, which means nature or essence. So a direct etymological translation of this verse would be, give us this day our above nature bread, or something like that.
Yeah, no, that would unfortunately be a blatant mistranslation based on an etymological fallacy. So, what Jesus whatnot is doing here is that he's assuming that a word's meaning can be derived from the origins of its parts. So, he looks up epi and ousia in Bible Hub, then he selects the meanings that he prefers, then he stitches them together, and he makes up a meaning of the word. And that's simply not how languages work. To understand a word, you examine how it actually functions in context, and then you examine how related expressions are actually used. And when you do that, you'll find out that epiousia means something similar to for existence, or necessary for life, or survival, which is, by the way, a reading that Origen, Chrysostom, and even Origen takes. So the phrase would then mean, give us the bread necessary for existence. And since it is related to the expressions epitenusan, meaning for today, or epiine, to come, or in the future, the phrase then means something like, give us today the bread for today or for tomorrow. But in either case, the primary concern here is ordinary bread, not supernatural bread. And of course, this fits well with the context of the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus repeatedly addresses the poor and material needs, and it fits the example that follow, the stories that Jesus tells afterwards. If your child asks for bread, will you give him a stone? And, friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread, for a friend of mine has arrived, and I have nothing to set before him. So, the text is concerned, Jesus is concerned about bread.
The Latin Vulgate, which was translated around 400 AD, actually has it in that way. It says, panem nostrum, so our bread, super substantialem, above nature or transcendent nature, da nobis hodie, give us today. So the question becomes, what super substantial or transcendent bread are we supposed to be receiving on a daily basis?
Now that's a beautiful, and I mean absolutely gorgeous Eucharistic reading, but it's an interpretation. It's simply not a defensible translation of the Greek. Because first, translating supersubstantialem as above nature or supersubstantial or supernatural is just very wooden. It's overly literal. More importantly, Jerome translates the same Greek word, epiousios, differently in Luke 11:3, where he uses quotidianum, like daily. So, since Matthew 6:11 and Luke 11 and verse 3 uses the same Greek word, and Luke even adds kathemeron, daily, or like day by day, the context strongly favors a temporal sense. In effect, Luke says something of the sort, give us our daily bread each day, or day by day, which likely explains Jerome's rendering in Luke. So, Jerome's translation of Matthew may reflect a Eucharistic interpretation. I don't doubt that. But that does not establish the original meaning of the Greek. Nor does supersubstantialum naturally mean supernatural, or like above nature. You cannot determine the meaning of the Greek word epiousios by dissecting Jerome's Latin translation into the English words super and substantial. I mean, that just misunderstands how the Latin term functions. Super substantialem does not carry the modern English meaning of super, like greatly substantial or supernatural. So, the Latin must be understood in its own linguistic context. And in its own context, the Latin is more plausibly understood as what, necessary for existence or subsistence than as something that is transcendent or supernatural. More fundamentally, the argument here that Jesus and whatnot presents relies on etymological fallacy. You see, epi can mean on, upon, for, toward, because of, over. It can just mean many things depending on the context. And likewise, ousia can mean existence, substance. It can mean property, wealth. It can mean possessions. It can mean many things depending on the context, how you use the word. And since both words have very broad semantic ranges, you simply cannot determine the meaning of epiousios by selecting preferred definitions and then mechanically combining them together. Words derive their meaning from usage, not from a simple sum of their parts. So no, the Our Father prayer does not mean give us today our super substantial or above nature supernatural bread. It means give us our daily bread.